welcome to the video. So I wanted to talk about the difference between a 9 to 5 job and shift work. Now I've done both. I've done casual work, I've done full-time work, I've done temping, and I've also worked full-time. And within those years that I have worked, has involved, working 9 to 5 and working shift patterns. The difference between 9 to 5 is basically what it is. It's mainly working during the day, so it could be from say about 8 till 4 or 9 to 5, and that is an ongoing. That's basically the hours that you would do for that company, and you rarely would have to work weekends or evenings. It all depends on the job. Shift work can vary. That's why you have firefighters, police, cleaning jobs, working for hospitals is basically shift work. So shift work can be from about 6 AM to 2 PM, for example. And then when working for a call centre, the shifts would be you start at 9, finish at 5 or 4 o'clock. If you started at 10, you'd finish at 6. And if you work the late shift, what we used to call what do we used to call it? It was basically the worst shift you can do, but you all had to do it, and that's working from 12 to 8. Now it all depends on what you're looking for and what type of industry you want to work in. Of course, we've had COVID and lockdown, so a lot of people have been furloughed and working from home, but you mainly still do your hours that is expected of you. And what used to annoy me was when people started, you knew the hours before you took the job. So I knew that I would have to work some weekends, not necessarily Saturday and Sunday. At one time I was just working weekends, and it worked for me because then I didn't have to worry about childcare, because I had childcare in place of my ex-husband would look after Henry at the weekends whilst I worked. But if you work full time, that meant that you would sort of do 2 weekends a month, or 1 weekend every 4 weeks. Again, it depends who you work for. When it comes to hospitals, a lot of the time they will do 10-hour shifts for 3 days or 4 days and have 4 days off. But again, it all depends on the profession. If it's medical, then you will always have to have nurses working, because people don't stop getting sick because the time of the day. When you're in hospital, you can pick up anything, and you may be in there for a long time. It depends what the issue is, but they always do a turnaround each day and consult with each other. So say for example someone did 6 till 2, they would make sure that someone could then do from 2 to 11 o'clock, and 11 to about 6 in the morning. And you would have to work, it was called the dead end shift, where no one really wanted to do the shift, but you knew you had to, so you would do the shift. At one point I was doing the 12 to 8 shift all of the time, but that took its toll, and so I went back to not doing it all the time, but you would do it 1 day per week, or you would do it for say 4 days, have a day off during the week, and then work 9 till 5 Monday and Saturday and Sunday. and the pay can be different. So if you work shift work, you will normally get paid each week or every other week. Again, it depends on the industry. But that's the difference between 9 to 5 job. A 9 to 5 job is set hours, where shift work is more flexible. And if you are a parent and a mum, it is good to try and get, work during the day. But that's hard to come by. But it is possible, and that's the kind of, work I'm looking into doing, is doing work that I can do within the school hours, so I can then do the drop off and pick up from school again. But that's that's not going to happen this month, but eventually I would like that to happen, because I also would like to have my own place again at some point. But if doing shift work is a lot more flexible than doing a 9 to 5 job, because they're set hours. With shift work, you can swap with people. If you didn't want, you had a party, for example, at the weekend, or a family gathering, and you could, if you gave them enough notice, then you wouldn't have to work that weekend. You could have that weekend off, and then you would swap with somebody who can work that weekend, and then you would do their weekend after. So that's the difference between the two, and it all depends on what suits you really. At Butlins, you would do split shifts most of the time. So you would do from 8 till say 11 o'clock, and then you would come back about 4 and finish at either around about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. And then I would, get dressed up and go to one of the venues, and then I would be dancing the night away. Because that's the thing about holiday camps, you've got everything there, so you live and breathe the work as such. And as long as you get up for work the next day, often I would still be out at 3 a.m. in the morning, and then go and do my shift at 7 a.m. in the morning. And that is, I've got makeup on my eyes, but that is, that's the difference between the two. And then often I would sleep and have a nap in the afternoon. The only problem with that is that sometimes I would get confused with what time of day it was. And then, or sometimes you would do a straight shift. So you would do from 8 till 4. And sometimes, if they didn't need me, they would ask me to do a straight shift. So I could have the evening off. And that often, was fantastic, because when you do split shifts, it's like, I'll go back in at 4. We'll go after again. But when you do straight shift, it was like, I've done my day's work, I can now get to have a shower, get my glados on, and then go out and have a few drinks on camp, and then go to my main venue that I loved, Jack's. And I would be a lot of the time dancing on stage. Sometimes I would get on the microphone. I'll still be drunk the next day. Now I don't recommend that, but that often was the case. But I still did my work at the end of the day. I was rarely ever late, only a few times. And I still did my shifts, and it was just it's working holiday camps is different to 9 to 5, because you basically are living in the job that you're working at. And some people thought that was tough, but for me it suited me at the time, and I'm really glad that I did it. It was a wonderful experience. And then I started to get temping work, which can be various hours. And then I found, I started doing like a Saturday job in Matalan. And then I found the job at Sitel, which was a contact centre. And that seemed to shoot me down to the ground at the time, because it was full time. And you're basically taking calls from customers who have bought products, and we need to know how they work, and we need technical support. So But that's the difference between shift work and working 9 to 5, is that it's a lot more flexible. You don't always have to do a whole day shift if there was no calls coming in, and you got paid for the hours that you did. So often you wouldn't get paid for holidays as such. You'd get some holiday pay, but when I was one of the last group that got paid for annual leave, and then they stopped that. So, and I don't know whether that was wrong of them to do that. I think that somebody did kick up a fuss about that at some point, because technically they're not really allowed to do that, but they but they did it anyway. But you know what annoyed me is some people would try and change the rota so they didn't have to do the weekends, and it's like, well, that's a bit unfair. You knew that you had to do weekends before you took the job, and now you've got the job, you're moaning because you don't want to do the hours. Well, and it's like, well, you knew what you were going to be facing when you took the job, so you can't moan, because everybody's got to do a weekend, and it wasn't every weekend as such, unless you swap with somebody. But you would rarely ever do 2 weekends on the trot, for example. You probably would do, say, 2 or 1 shift in the weekend per month, Or sometimes the retailers do it where you'll have 1 weekend off and 1 weekend on. It all depends on the industry. It all depends on the demand of your work. But that's the difference. And so, if you are a parent, for example, then shift work is a lot more adaptable in that case, and that's the difference between the two. So I hope you find these videos helpful, and I will be doing more, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.